Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Empowerment with Power BI webinar series. We are going to go ahead and wait for a few more attendees to log on. I see some people trying to log on right now, so we're going to wait a few minutes. In the meantime, my name is Sarah Weeder. I work in the marketing department at Motifworks, and I'm going to be sort of acting as a moderator for the webinar today. We're going to learn a lot about dashboards and all of those types of things, you know, how we visualize all sorts of information. So we're really excited to share all that information with you. So we will get started in a couple of minutes. Thank you. All right, everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that are just now joining, welcome to our Empowerment with Power BI webinar series. We are really excited to share a lot of really great information with you today. Tarun Agrawal is going to be hosting this webinar. He is the Director of Data and AI at Motifworks, so he's very, very knowledgeable, has a lot of experience in Power BI, and we're really lucky to have him here today to share all of his knowledge with us. So Tarun, why don't you go ahead and get started, and thank you very much.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you are joining this webinar today. Thanks for your time to take the time out from your busy schedule and attend this webinar. So we are having this series of Power BI webinars that really talks about how Power BI is empowering the employees in various organizations to really drive a data culture, and how can we use tools like Power BI to really use it for data-driven decision making. So this is the fourth webinar in the series of 5 webinars that we are doing. But before that, just a brief background about myself. As Sarah mentioned, I am the Director of Data and AI at Motifworks, which we are a Microsoft Gold partner and a cloud solution provider company. We are currently using Microsoft Azure various data services, tools, and technologies to enable digital transformation for our customers, and use leverage the data platform to leverage the enablement of digital transformation. Prior to working with at Motifworks, I have over 20 years of experience working in various Fortune 100 to Fortune 500 financial services companies. Quick background about Motifworks. Like I mentioned, we are Microsoft Gold partners and a cloud solution provider company. We are a company which is born in cloud, and we think cloud first. We live and breathe Azure every day, and we take pride in calling ourselves Azure Smart. We are working with our customers in various different industries and sectors to really accelerate their digital transformation, bring agility to their workloads, infrastructure application, improve decision making using data and AI, and rebuilding a connected application ecosystem for them. How do we do that? We do it by elevating their current IT infrastructure by adopting to the cloud, whether it's a rehost, replatform, or re-architecture. We use various innovative platform as a service and serverless technologies to modernize their application portfolio, and as well as also build their data as asset and data platform using data modernization techniques, including machine learning and artificial intelligence. And we also help manage the cloud solution platform and help the organization operate their cloud solutions by providing a managed cloud services platform, and also various on-demand consulting kind of services. All right, so like we mentioned, this is the fourth webinar in the series of 5 webinars, and today we will be talking about how can we create a compelling visualization and dashboard and really tell a story using data. Okay, various things we are going to talk about that are very, very key to build a good reports and dashboard and visualizations, and what is the right process we should be using, what kind of charts and graphs we should be using, what is the best way to present this information to really make a impactful story for the end users. Just a quick refresher of I think we have been looking at this in all the webinars, but just a quick refresher. Power BI allows you to experience your data anywhere you want, anywhere you want, whether it's data generating in cloud, on premises, structured, unstructured, you name it. Any kind of data, you can bring it in Power BI and consume it anywhere you want, whether you want to consume it on a browser, on a mobile phone, inside Excel, inside Microsoft Teams, or embed in your existing web applications. You can consume it anywhere you want. We are in the third phase of BI, which is a really end user BI, where we are actually empowering the end users to really enable themselves to generate the data insights. So what do really end user need? End user need to ability to access the data that they're really trying to analyze. They want to clean the data, because data is not clean all the time. It's not in the right structure and format. So they want to clean the data, they want to combine the data and create data mashups that can be useful to leverage. And then they want to explore the data that they've combined and cleaned. They want to visualize the data. They want to generate the various findings from the data and insights, and they want to share it with the rest of their colleagues and the other business stakeholders. So these are all the end user need that they would like to do with a tool like Power BI, and Power BI gives them all these features in the tool. It allows you to access all your data. There are more than 115 data connectors that you can use to access the data. Again, like I said, whether the data is coming from cloud, on-premises, structured, unstructured, relational, unrelational, file-based, any kind of data can be accessed in Power BI. It allows you to clean the data using various data wrangling, data cleansing techniques, and transform the data, combine the data using various data mashups, Power Query Editor, M language, DAX functions. These are some of the things we have been talking for last 3 webinars. So it allows you to really clean and create data mashups so that can be used to really visualize the data and then explore the data to visualize it, come up with the right kind of data insights to really tell a story. Okay. All the things that we have been learning in last 3 webinars for the last 3 weeks is around how do we create the right data model that can support the visualization and really start to find the hidden patterns in the data. right? So we talked about various kind of structuring techniques of the data. We talked about star schema and the snowflake schemas, which is really very, very helpful to and performant in a Power BI kind of a solution because of the in-memory Vertipack engine that is empowering the Power BI. And you can create relationships between your facts and the dimension using various kind of relationship techniques available in Power BI. So today we are going to talk about, we're going to take whatever we have learned so far and take it further to understand how do we really visualize the data, to really tell a story using the data that can be used to drive the decisions. So we see every day reports and dashboard that have a lot of problems. This is an example of a dashboard. Again, not used as an example. I'm not trying to nitpick on anybody's work that they've done to build a dashboard. So if you can see here, there's too much going on in this report. Even though it has a lot of information, a lot of data, I see a lot of visuals here, but I'm not sure what is it the report is trying to tell. I'm not sure how a business user or end user will be able to drive decisions using a dashboard like this. Use of I see a lot of prominent colors have been used. There is too much clutter going on. So not really very, very helpful. It's a good dashboard or a report, but not very helpful. Large numbers are used with the 2 decimal point precision, which is not, I think in this grand scheme of thing, I'm not sure what 2 point decimal is going to do when you're looking at millions and thousands of data. All right, so let's look at this example. So this is a report which is trying to tell the jobs that were created in United States between 2007 to 2012. And let's see if this is telling a story that the user wants to depict. So the way I see that is, it is, I think, towards the end of 2007, there were some jobs that were created, but then we started losing jobs, and there were more layoffs happening in the labor market since the beginning of 2008, and that stayed until probably beginning of 2010, and then we started actually having more jobs than more layoffs. So it started having a positive trend. And the color I see here is actually, there's a marker right there in the January 2009 timeframe that says President Obama takes office. So it's actually, they are using the color to depict the party change. So the red is all, I think, the party before Obama, which was Republican Party, and after that it was a Democratic Party took over. So it's like trying to depict using the color for a party change. But can you see a pattern here? Do you see what exactly the user is trying to intend here? So I'm sure it actually gives a lot of more additional questions than it also provides answer. But I think looking at one visual, that's really the intent that the creator or the author of this report is trying to tell is it gives rise to multiple other questions, but it is actually serving the purpose of showing that how the jobs were created between this time frame, right? So let's understand the science behind data visualization. And these are some of the common problems using the same dashboard we saw earlier. We see similar problems in most of the reports, which are not very meaningful. There's no context of data. There's a data all over the place. You see, and the top report is saying campaign ID, segment, category segment ID. I mean, business users, end users probably do not understand IDs. And the report, any report that they're getting that based on some ideas, it's not really meaningful for them. The too much of background color, and it's also the visual color is also very similar to the background color. We talked about the precision. The data is at the very low level, and very high excessive precision is used at this level of numbers. Here, the layout is very busy. It's too much clutter. There's no highlighting used anywhere to really tell something that stands out, and bad use of colors we talked about, right? So you can see, I think other thing I see is that if you see on the chart on the right side, it is given by mobile sales of and the tablet sales by product, and there are whole lot of products, and there's a big scroll bar on the right. So like this many products, nobody will be able to retain at this level. This is too detailed report for anybody to really generate any meaningful decisions. The filters are given at the right side, and it should be on the dashboard itself, not at the right side, to really pick and choose what we're trying to do. So these are the common problems that you will see the pattern occurring in multiple times. Really improve and talk about how can we create an impactful visualization, we need to first understand the cognitive science behind the way our brain functions and our brain uses. So 70% of the information that we gather and we retain, it comes from the visual memory. And we have three kinds of memory in our brain. The first one is called iconic memory, short term, then we have short term memory, and then the long term memory. For any decisions to really empower any business user to make any decision using any reports or dashboard, we need the purpose of our dashboard. It should be that it retains into end users or consumer of the reports long-term memory. Then only they will be able to really use it for decision making. So let's understand iconic memory. So iconic memory is the large part of our brain. It actually functions based on the visual stimuli, and it stays for a very small time frame, only for a fraction of seconds. So if you were to look at objects in the room here, we all are sitting right now, take a look at any object and then close your eyes and try to visualize that object. Okay, just look at an object, close your eye and try to visualize that object. The visual image that you are seeing for that object with your eyes closed, that actual image is coming from your iconic memory of your brain. So information needs to pass from iconic memory to the short-term memory, and from short-term memory to the long-term memory to really retain. So as we talked about, iconic memory takes large volume of data, but only lasts for a fraction of a second. 99% of the information that we gather in our iconic memory, it just gets discarded. So think of it, iconic memory is like using a filter underneath a faucet of water, and you open the water faucet, everything is gonna go and filter down right away down the filter. It will not retain anything. Only some particle, large dust particle or anything that's really there is gonna retain. Everything else is gonna filter out. So exactly the same way our iconic memory works. Only useful and interesting data that passes through iconic memory, which is going to be retained inside the short-term memory. If you really talk about a little bit more about iconic memory, it is based on the precognitive attributes. The precognitive attributes are the attributes that intuitively able to understand the image without thinking about the image. That's really the precognitive attributes of a memory, and that's what it filters down into short-term memory. And just to add another data point here, based on various research and science, human attention span is about 8 seconds. So for any information that we consume, if we are not able to understand within 8 seconds, it will most likely not be able to retain it. So that's really the whole idea behind creating dashboards and reports, is give a user compelling reason enough to understand the information, so it can go from iconic memory to short-term memory to the long-term memory that can be retained within 8 seconds. Okay, so how do we really make a dashboard that we saw earlier, something which can not be discarded from iconic memory and which can stay? The first thing we should think about is mute the background. There are the background is bright color all over the report, right? There are thick borders and the grid lines which are used. So these are some of the things that we can use to immediately make it much more impactful and able to retain. So if I mute the background, the same information that was there, I can make it much. I think it makes much more sense. I think all that very strong purple color, it's disappeared, and now I'm using blue color for urban, and it's basically a similar color pattern if you see across my all the visuals. It is using the same blue color for urban, dark blue color for mix and everything. So now it's becomes all of a sudden, it becomes much more subtle. The borders have gone, the grid lines have gone, and it is much more useful. Still, I think there's a lot of room for improvement, but right away you can see by muting these noise from the background, we are able to make it much more impactful. Another thing that comes up is, since we are looking at this report, which is based on a pie chart, is pie chart even a right visual to use, right? So a lot of time I'm sure you have seen a pie chart that looks like the pie chart on the left. It is at a too granular level. Nobody can understand what is really happening. It's really, really bad pie chart. But if you look at the other two the pie chart and the donut chart in the middle, can you differentiate between yellow and black? Which one is larger? uh, Almost look the same, similar, but it's very, very hard to differentiate. And the way our brain works and functions, we tend to interpret rectangular objects better than circular objects. So if we were to recreate this pie chart into a horizontal bar chart, the yellow and black, now we can see that yellow is slightly larger than the black, which is not very apparent in the pie chart and the donut chart, right? So take a look at this visual. What do you interpret from this visual? Right, these are basically, I think, it seems to me is like it's a number of service tickets that we are getting based on various levels of priority. And immediately, I think our attention goes to the one color, which is in the red color, everything else is black. That is urgent tickets. So I think that probably the author is trying to intend is there are 443 urgent tickets that we need to work on. So even though the medium tickets is the largest bar, the attention goes towards the red color because that's the only color which is distinct, right? So now, using this all this information we just observed for last few minutes, if we were to change that the report that we had and convert those pie charts into bar chart, a horizontal bar chart, it starts to emphasize the data far better than what we saw earlier. And we can see that the urban category is the largest category. It is by profit, by sales, by volume, and the units sold, right? And the other thing that you might have, I do not know if you paid attention to, I changed the product ID visual from the right to the other category level. It is a much higher level, and it's easy to interpret than looking at all the hundreds of products in one go. I think we can, and then this report is going to give down to the drill down of each category by product. So it will be much more easy to evaluate product level information by drilling down as opposed to looking all the products from all the categories at the same time. All right, so from iconic memory, we talk about short-term memory. So short-term memory lasts for only a few seconds. So iconic memory we saw can only last for a fraction of a second. Short-term memory will last only for a few seconds. And within that few seconds, in the short-term memory, our brain is able to take about 3 to 5 pieces of information. Okay, and then it will try to use, you take those 3 to 5 pieces of information that it can take in few seconds and try to detect patterns in those information. And those are the patterns that it can identify. That's the one that will filter down to the long-term memory. Okay, otherwise it will not go down to the long-term memory if our brain cannot find patterns between the 3 to 5 information that they see. And the short-term memory actually works based on the Gestalt's principles, which is how do we view the data together by combining the data, which is based on some pattern to detect the pattern. So Gestalt's principles are also used very often, frequently in building web applications and different kinds of web development. The web developers are probably familiar with the Gestalt principles. The idea is to see the patterns of the data by grouping the things together. So if you have data which are close proximity of lines, we group them together, sort them together, so then we can see the pattern in the data. And another thing that helps really is to come up with a trend line, so we can understand which of these data is above or beyond the trend, which could be an average sale or last year's sale. Anything could be the based on the trend. if the pattern, the report in the beginning, in the center for various line chart, that's really not very useful for a human brain to interpret. That's more like a machine kind of a chart. But if we were to use it for some reason, it will make sense to put multiple things together so we can detect the pattern between the multiple things as opposed to try to interpret everything individually. Using the color and making some things that bold stands out is also very helpful in detecting patterns and closing the similar thing together. So these are all the ways our short-term memory is able to detect the patterns in the data. Talking about the long-term memory, that's the memory that lasts for a long times, and data needs to be in the long-term memory for us to use it for decision making. So using all these things that we talked about, the precognitive attributes and the gestalt pattern, uh, something like this that gives the story around the service tickets that we have received to really draw attention on. There are 443 tickets which are urgent priority, uh, is going to retain the most in our long-term memory. All right, so let's try to understand what is the process behind data visualization based on what we have seen. So before we start coming up with the dashboard and visuals, we should follow the process. The process is an iterative process that talks about rapid prototyping, building wireframes, coming up with various kind of prototypes of the data, getting interactive feedback from the users, and redoing the prototype until we get it right. So that's really a agile kind of a process that we should follow for building an visualization. But before we even get to that, before we even start doing the prototype, we should ask questions about who will be using this data, what is this data used for, what kind of business decisions needs to be derived from this data, how the user of this data will be consuming this data, on what device, what platform they will be consuming, what decisions will be derived for it, how often will they need it, when do they need it. So these kind of questions will help us create the better visuals, better story around data, and those can be used for rapid prototyping. I use the word wireframe in the world of end user BI and using tools like Power BI. Uh, we can use the Power BI itself to create the prototype. We don't really need to go and use additional external tools to create prototype wireframes for prototyping purposes. The purpose of Power BI is to do rapid development inside the tool, within the tool, get the interactive feedback from the end users, change the prototype, and get continuous feedback and continuous development to really come up with a agile process around building the visualizations. Yep. So other thing we can do is when we come up with the questions that we are trying to answer, like what is my total sales for selected year and region, these questions will also help us define our data model that we talked about, right? Where is my kind of information, the KPI, the total sales, the number of units. So these are going to define our measures, and the information that we are asking that I want to see by year or by region. These are going to define our dimensions or attributes that describe the data and defines the filters and the slicers that we are going to use it. So depending on asking those initial questions I talked about, who the user are, what business decisions they are going to drive, how are they going to drive it, this is going to give rise to the questions. Those questions will help us come up with the right data model, and those data models will be used to define the visualization in our dashboard. In terms of the layout, when you look at any report on dashboard, the most attention will be drawn towards the center of the dashboard. So we should make sure that we keep the most important piece of information in the center and followed by the top left corner. And then the next one goes towards the top right. The bottom left is the third one, and the least important information on the report should be on the bottom right side. But if you are building this dashboard for a Middle Eastern customer or Middle Eastern client in Hebrew or Arabic, then those guys write from right to left. So those this is going to change depending on if you are doing this. Otherwise, for people in North America, this kind of a pattern for layout is going to be very effective to build your reports and dashboards. So if you talk about looking at the dashboard layout, there are various formats you can use to lay out your data. It could be a columnar format or a horizontal format. We'll talk about that. So think about this as you have three different areas to show the information about. Then you build uh, some KPIs that is similar across all the business areas as a first row, and then another one or two, whatever level of information that you have, and then followed by a chart. So that is a very, very powerful and effective way of creating dashboards. This is an example of a dashboard. If you see, there are multiple areas that is across, that's going in columns, and underneath the rows you see we are using one piece of information: month through date numbers, month over month metric, week over week metric, and actuals by each segment. So if you, whether you look at vertically for each business unit or business area, you can see all the information related to one business unit, versus if you look for one column, you can see one piece of information like month over month trend across all the business units. So that's a very, very effective way of laying out your dashboard design. This is the horizontal design I was talking about. Here, the line of businesses are laid out horizontally, and the chart which is used here is a 2 KPI in one. It's a custom visual. It's not out of the box available in Power BI, but using this visual, we are trying to depict the two different KPIs for each line of businesses in the same graph, and it gives you a horizontal view of your dashboard. So we can talk about the chart selection, but before we talk about chart selection, let me give you a quick demo of a dashboard and how the information we can think about flows through. So this is a sales dashboard. I think we looked at this dashboard in the first webinar. For those of you who probably attended the webinar or saw the recording later on. So here, the dashboard, we are looking at the sales number for various manufacturers. So Van Arsdale, which is the main manufacturer, has about 47% market share. We can see each of the manufacturers' sales across year. And you can see where this is the Van Arsdale, which is leaps and bounds ahead of all the other manufacturers in terms of its sales. Then we see the market share by country. We see the revenue, total revenue by each country. So United States has the most number of most revenue for this company, and we also see the Twitter information, all the tweets across year. So in 2018, that is uptrend going on. Number of tweets is going up, and it's until 2018 and 2019. I think probably because of the mid-year, it was when this dashboard was created, does not have all the information. But from here, we can click down on any of the KPI, like I clicked on the market share, and we can see the detailed information. So natively, intuitively, from a dashboard, we come down to a detailed report from where we can now further analyze this data. So we can see this is Van Arsdale, its revenue by across region, and North America has the highest number of revenue. You can see the trend of sales across time, and we can see the trend of revenue and percentage growth across product categories and segments. And this is actually a time thing, which can across time, it shows how the revenues is changing, right? From here, we can click down to any specific. So I am right now right clicking and trying to analyze North America data. So I can go to look at the data for North America by manufacturer. So now, because I filtered on North America, it is only for one country, and you can see how the North American sales are growing and how the profit margin percentage growth is changing for North America, and the breakdown by category. Product category, and we can drill down to information from each product category, to each segment, to category, to product level. So that gives you very, very detailed information, and really allows you to really analyze this data very, very intuitively, and within a fraction of few minutes of few seconds, you will be able to analyze this information. So that's really a idea behind using the layout and the way we can view the information. All right. So with this, let's look at various type of charts which is available to us, and how best we can use it. So like when you talk about the column chart, right? So typically, a lot of times what we see is uh, the chart is used, but it can be very, very effective, but if we use the right technique. So in this first example, it's showing the chart, but it is not starting from the zero axis. So the meaning of quarterly sales uh, is not really coming out very clearly because of the not proper use of the right axis, y-axis. So if you convert this and start at 0, now you can see relatively how quarters are doing much better than looking at the first chart. This is by revenue by state, but again, it is alphabetically sorted by state, which is not very, very effective. We can change the sort order and make it by number of units sold, which is the main KPI used here. And we can see a pattern far better than what we see in the same chart above. Right, try to put a trend line and use colors to draw attention, specific maybe a threshold of until X number of units, you use it a different color and then use a trend line to really depict the column chart much more compelling information, right? Right. So this is an example where when we are using many elements to display in a column chart, uh, maybe the information, the pattern in the data is not intuitively that comes out, right? If you use this and convert into a horizontal bar chart, the same information probably gives you a better uh, insight into the data and actually much more intuitive, right? With you can understand this the trend in this data far easily than a column chart. So there is options. When we use line charts, uh, important thing to notice is line charts are going to be very effective if we start to put a trend line. So we can really use to understand how the line chart is showing us a trend based on a trend line, which could be a weighted average or a moving average kind of a trend line. And aspect ratio plays a very important role. If we use it too short, the peaks are going to be very big, and it will probably the smaller data will lose the value. Whereas if you use a too high aspect ratio, then the line is going to look like a flat line. So understand the importance of using the right aspect ratio to really depict the pattern of your data effectively. When we deal with the data which has a gap in between, we should think about, should we be using continuous versus categorical axis, right? That makes a lot of difference between when we use the line chart and specifically dealing with the break in the data. Area chart. So a lot of people try to use area chart because it looks colorful, but it's actually can be very distracting, or it could be confusing, specifically if you are using too many areas. So it is maybe more effective when you have it like only few number of areas that you are trying to show. But in this particular example, I think probably the line chart, the same information is able to depict better than an area chart. I'm not really even sure what exactly these areas are trying to tell me. Whereas while looking at the line, I can really easily make out that what the regional pattern for month-over-month sales looks like. So again, the stacked area chart is use it very wisely. Is not very effective, and for most of the use cases, it's probably you can use maybe a tree map better than an area chart if the idea is to really show the area under which is by size. Maybe a tree map might be better because our try trends to interpret using the top of the lines rather than using the area, right? So not really very useful, the stack charts for most of the use cases. But where it becomes very effective is something where we are trying to visualize information to understand a comparison against a moving average or a trend line, right? So here, if you see what this chart is doing is showing the red line as a 7-day moving average, and the green line is the euro rate of the day. So it's a euro daily changes of the daily euro rate, and the red line is a 7-day average. So these are the areas where the daily rate was higher than the 7-day moving average, and these pink are the areas where it was lower than the moving average. So this use of area chart in this use case is very, very effective, and it actually depicts the story far better than other use cases that we have seen. Clustered stack column chart versus clustered column chart. You should use stack column chart when the total is more important, right? To compare the total of a particular product category is more important than the individual breakdown. If the individual breakdown of these product categories is more important, then maybe a stack column chart makes more sense that you can use to compare, as opposed to the clustered column chart makes more sense than a stack column chart. So depending on what KPI is more important, the total or the breakdown of the category, you decide between cluster versus stack chart. Maps, like we talked about, are very, very useful to visualize proportions. So when we are trying to see the area, I think I was talking about the area chart. So if you're looking at the number of units sold by the different channels, so it's very useful, and it tells you the organic search. People who are coming to Google and to search our products are the most reason for selling, the channel for selling our products. And if you want to break it further down, you can also make it a drill down chart where organic search is also broken down by the devices. So it becomes very effective that the most people who are buying through organic search are desktop devices. All right, pie chart, I think we briefly touched upon. A pie chart which has a lot of slices is not very effective. It's so confusing, better not to use it than create something like this. Pie chart is really useful when you have a limited number of slices which are sorted proportionately to make a more sense of a pie. Tabular charts, tables for the data, I think we can make it also very, very effective if we use it properly. First of all, I think the background color creates a lot of noise. So mute the background color. Make sure that information is highlighted properly. Use the proper sorting. Use the patterns to indicate something that you want to stand out. So in this case, the negative sign you're showing by a downward mark. That way you can make the tables very, very effective. The cards, I think Power BI has a feature for using cards. It could be multi-line card or single line card. They're also very, very effective. Category labels should be named for each visual and use the right precision level. I think a lot of time people create a card that gives the 14 million number that is shown here, instead of writing in a abbreviated 14M. M stands for million, the full all zeros, leading zeros, which is not very effective way of using the depicting the information in a card. So use effectively the cards very effectively, which is really highlighting the overall number. And also you can also combine the cards by using the right trend marker to show whether it's going upwards or downwards. That also becomes very, very effective. Slicer, we use it most of the time. First word of advice is do not use the filters panel of the Power BI to really drive your slicer. That's not really user friendly. You should put the slicers on the reports itself, as opposed to using the filter panel. Filter panel is a lot more technical and has a lot of other things, and it can confuse people. So there are multiple ways you can create slicers within Power BI. You can use it list slicer, you can use chiclet slicers, and you can use drop downs, you can use selection way. So multiple ways, but you should always think about what is the best way to depict. So if you are going to create chiclet slicers and you are going to show one chiclet for each day, that's using a lot of real estate, right? So depending on maybe some of the use cases, maybe you have enough real estate and putting a chiclet slicer makes sense. but you can convert a day level slicer using a date slicer shown on the top right, where you can go down to each by sliding this slicer. You can select two individual dates better than in a very small real estate than using a chiclet slicer. Another important aspect of that is enclose the slicers with a subtle box so that users know that this is a separate area for apply all the filters which is needed on the page. Okay, conserve the space by using the drop-down slicers. So otherwise, if you have a large department name, long list of department, imagine right now it's only showing 5, but if this has 50, the entire page is gonna just get filled because of 50. So in this kind of example, a drop-down department name makes much more sense than using a list of departments. So depending on what kind of reports and dashboards you're trying to do, play with the slicer, because slicers are very, very effective part. It will, for most of the dashboard will require slicer. And so it will be using a right technique to build your slicers are going to be very, very impactful. Scatter plots is another kind of visualization a lot of people use. It's very, very powerful. Scatter plot can use to see more than two variables. It could be actually even 3 or even actually more than that. So mostly we use 2 or 3 that level of dimensions. So you can use the x-axis for one metric, y-axis for another one, and then the size of the scatter bubble as the third matrix. So that is very, very powerful. But again, use it where it makes sense, and you can also build hierarchy, and it can help you to allow you to drill down from a region to country to state, those kind of things. So very, very effectful. And another thing, a lot of it will be very, very impactful when you have to go across time, because you can use 3 dimensions in the chart itself, by the x-axis, y-axis, and the size of the bubble. Color could be another one that you can use to differentiate. And the another one that you can use is the time axis. Basically, use the play button to really move the data across and see the data changes across time. So this time axis can be also very impactful to use scatter plot. So use it wisely. It does not make sense in most of the time, but where it makes sense, it's very, very impactful. With that, I think probably gives you enough information of how can we use the various features and the layout of Power BI to create very, very impactful reports and dashboard that tells a story that allows a user to detect the pattern, hopefully within 8 seconds, so it can retain in our long-term memory, and that can be used for decision making. All right. So with that, I think we come to conclusion of our 4th webinar, which talks about how do we really create compelling stories using data. Okay, this was the 4th webinar we talked about. We have one more webinar in this series left, the last one, which is going to be around how do we infuse artificial intelligence inside Power BI reports. That will be a week from today at the same time that will happen. So I'll take a pause here, and I will hand it back to Sarah to see if there are any questions that we can take at this point of time. And otherwise, you'll always feel free to email me your questions directly also, that I've been doing in the past. I will be able to respond through email also. So Sarah, back to you.
Thank you, Tarun. So as Tarun said, right now, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I'm actually already seeing one question. It says, thank you for such a wonderful webinar. What do you mean by chiclet slicers, and will it affect our report?
Say the second part of it, chiclet slicer, and?
Will it affect our report?
Will it affect our report? Okay, perfect. So I think, so if I go back to my slide, so this is a chiclet slicer, right? So when you see the ear, right? So each ear looks like a tile. So this is called a chiclet slicer. It is actually a custom visualization available in Power BI. You will be able to import it in your report, and it creates a separate tile for each ear. So this is like a chiclet. So you can select 2010, or you can multi-select using control key to select multiple of them, right? So that's a chiclet slicer. So it is going to be using, it will work as the same way as you use any other filter, a drop-down filter, which is a kind of another visualization. So the impact is not going to be different, but it allows you to slice it much more easily depending on the use case in this case.
All
I
right.
hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Tarun. Next question is, what is the difference between a dashboard and a report?
All right, so dashboard actually is a collection of various report visual in one container. So think of a dashboard like a container where you are showing the most important and most relevant information or the KPIs that is catered towards a specific audience. So if your audience is senior management who are trying to see where the business is heading at a bird's eye view, then the overall KPI is to show the total sales, total profit, sales across years or sales across region. Those are the different kind of KPIs that will make sense in a dashboard. Each of the KPIs, like I mentioned, it's a collection of various report visual, can come from one or multiple reports. And a report is actually a deeper dive analytical report template that allows you to see multiple visuals that can interact with each other. When you click on a dashboard tile, you cannot drill down or you cannot filter a dashboard tile. It will actually directly take you from a dashboard tile to the report from where the tile is coming from to allow you to do further analysis. And a report is based on top of a data set, whereas a dashboard is based on top of a report or reports. Thank you for the question.
All right, we have another question. It says, can we create a dashboard from multiple reports?
Yes, like I just mentioned, yes, you can create a one dashboard, which is a collection of multiple visuals coming from one or multiple reports. So the short answer is yes, you can create it. And actually that's an effective way of building a dashboard. You create the reports, multiple reports for a specific use case, and then you bring the most prominent KPIs into one dashboard that is focused towards a specific audience.
Okay,
Interesting
perfect.
questions today.
And we have another question as well. Thank you, Tarun, for answering all these questions. Really appreciate it. Can we create multiple reports from the same data sheet?
Can we create multiple reports from a same data set? I am assuming this is a data set question.
Yeah.
So yes, the answer is yes. We can create multiple reports from a same data set. So think of a scenario where we are dealing with sales information, right? Organizations' total sales and by various product lines across time, across location, region, those kind of things. We can build a data set that combines data from multiple data sources. It could be coming from CRM system, it could be coming from business application, it could be coming from systems of records of all your sales information, it could be coming from external third parties data into one data set. And that data set now has all the relevant information around your sales matrix. And then that can be used for creating multiple reports. And then those multiple reports can be combined into one or multiple dashboards. So that's how the hierarchy in Power BI works. One caveat I would like to just highlight here, I'm not sure if that was the intent of this question, is you can create multiple reports from a data set, but you cannot edit a data set to create a new report. That will not work. You will, if you are trying to create a new report using an existing data set, then you will have to use all the data that is coming from the data set. You cannot add additional data here. I hope that makes sense. All great questions today, Sarah. Thanks for those.
Yeah. So I'm not seeing any more questions. We'll give everyone a few more minutes, but if you do have questions, you think of them later, feel free to email Tarun like he said. And then you will be able to access the registration page for the next webinar in an email that will come out in the next 24 hours. So you can sign up for the next webinar from that email. You can also view the videos from the past webinars if you have interest in them. And you will be receiving this video in that email as well. So feel free to watch it as many times as you want, share it with your team, whatever you want to do with that. And it's looking like there are no more questions. So thank you guys so much for registering and attending. We really hope that you learned a lot. Feel free to send any questions, comments, whatever you may have our way, and we hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you, Tarun, again for sharing all of your knowledge with us.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah, for hosting it, and thanks everyone for attending it.